Good evening, everyone. We're continuing with 4 minutes of Mishlei. We're up to Perek Yud Gimel, chapter 13. Pasuk Chav Dalet is what I want to focus on. The pasuk says, "Chosech shivto sone v'no." He who spares the rod from his son hates him. V'oavo shicharo musar, and one who loves his son disciplines him early. So I have a very simple question: are we supposed to read this pasuk to mean that we're supposed to hit our children? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? I don't think most people today would recommend hitting children, on a basic level of discipline. I don't know. I haven't done a survey, but that seems to be my feeling. So I want to share with you an explanation from Rav Shlomo Volbe, who I feel a special connection with because I learned in a VAD or some sort of long-term Musar study with a student of his, Rav Ruven Leuchter, and many people in this generation have a special connection with Rav Volbe. He was sort of the educator's educator, and he was known as the Mashkiach, and he brought the approach of Musar to the next generation in the 20th century. So in his Sefer, Planting and Building, it's translated, but it's originally written Zriya Ubinyan. I have an English translation here. So he addresses this question. He says, our perspective should not be that a parent should basically, and he talks about this as an educator as well, the question is not, when should we punish the children? That's not the approach. He says sometime at one point they interviewed a candidate for some position in their yeshiva, and in a yeshiva in Israel, and the candidate wanted to know how much authority would they be given? When can they punish? You can almost imagine them going okay, so what? He's like, that's not our approach. Our approach is not that we derive our authority through our ability to punish. He said this is true for educators, it's also true for parents. He says, well, how do I deal with this pasuk? If I'm not supposed to be punishing, doesn't it say I hate my son if I withhold the rod? Doesn't it say that in Mishlei? So he says like this. We have a pasuk in Zechariah, in Perek Yud Aleph, pasuk Zayin. It says, "The est tzon hahariga lachein ani atzon." The pasuk says, "I attended the flock that were supposed to be slain." I'm not getting into the whole story here, but it's talking about a mashal of Israel's master, which is it's basically the Jewish people and other nations. But it says a line here in this pasuk, "Ve'akach li shnei maklos." I took 2 rods. La'achad karasi noam, 1 rod I called pleasantness, u'la'achad karasi chovlim, and 1 I called damaging or destroying. So he says here, we see from this pasuk in Zechariah that there are really 2 rods. Sometimes the rod of pleasantness is called for, and sometimes the rod of destruction is called for. And he says that if I give a child encouragement, I give them noam, the rod of pleasantness, this is also something good. This is a different kind of motivator. It's an encouraging. We call it there's different ways of talking about a positive association. He says it's impossible to estimate how much damage someone does to a child when he gives them a serious spanking. And he says Rav Elia Lopian would always say with children, only in a pleasant manner, only with pleasantness. And then he says that another proof to this is that there's a medrash in Breishis Rabbah that says every blade of grass has a mazel. Every blade of grass has some sort of angel's force, and it says the mazel has a staff or a rod that beats it and tells it to grow. He says, of course, the intention of this medrash is not that an angel with white wings and pink cheeks, armed with a baton, sits on every blade of grass and hits it. He says Chazal's intention is to say that there is a force that causes grass to grow. And that force, in the language of Chazal, is called a blow. This is how we should understand the rod in the pasuk. It doesn't mean that you should hit your child, and if you don't, then you hate him. It means that you need to encourage the child, and you need to guide him, and you need to make sure that his growth is something that you are responsible for. And his last proof, just to point out, is he has a proof that the Gemara in Kiddushin talks about in Chazal's times that if you have an older child and you hit them, it's lifnei iver. It's you're setting him up for basically hitting you back. And nowadays, our situation is different than in other times. In the Talmudic times, it was different. Today, we have to deal with the reality that we have. And when a person if their entire relationship with their child is built on punishment and a negative association, it's not a positive thing. He says you have to build a relationship of trust, and you can't educate your children when you don't have good midos. And he goes on a whole thing. We have to work on ourselves as educators and as children before we can be impactful to our educators and parents, before we can be impactful to children.